Friday. Hey, everybody, welcome aboard. I'm glad you could make it. This is going to be exciting because we have two wonderfully successful writers from Ohio State graduates, making us all shine in beautiful Hollywood. Again, I'm Scott Spears, BFA, master's degree at Ohio State, shot a bunch of movies, came back to Ohio, and now I'm sharing my knowledge with students and strange people on the street. And our guest today, coming to us, one from Toledo, from the state of Ohio, we have Dana Greenblatt, and she is currently working on the show SEAL Team, which is on CBS. When's it coming back? When do we?
Soon. We don't have air dates yet, but we are in production.
Okay. And then she also worked on Queen Sugar and Nashville. So my wife loved that show. And other shows such as The Dead Zone and Angel Eyes, True Calling. And again, she's in Toledo. How's the weather in Toledo?
It's gorgeous. It's a beautiful fall day up here.
Okay. And now we'll move to Holly, who we went to high school together down in Portsmouth, Ohio. And we were in the band. We were in the band together. Awesome. And I had no idea until later how interested she was in film production. So that's very exciting. That we got people making movies. So started out early with Smallville, and kind of made her brand, and then worked into Criminal Minds, and then worked on the show Believe. We talked about that.
Ouch.
Yes, and Heroes, and she is currently working on CBS's SEAL Team.
No, I wound up last season, although I think there'll be 2 more episodes that I was on that will air. But
okay, gotcha. Okay.
Last season, yeah.
And then she's currently trying to get a show off the air. If you want to talk about that,
I can.
Our hometown of Portsmouth.
Oh, well, there's 3 shows. So I am currently working on my own thing. There's a saying that Steven Spielberg said about your career is often made on the jobs you turn down. So I have been fortunate to turn several things down this year to push forward on my own stuff. I have, as Scott said, oddly a reality show, which I've never done before, about our hometown of Portsmouth, which simply came up because a friend of mine is a reality producer, and he was talking about a show he sold to the upcoming Magnolia Network, which is the Chip and Joanna Gaines, please stay in the business, we'll throw you lots of money, new network, that I think premieres in March. At any rate, I said, dude, you have to hear about our hometown. And he was sort of obligated to listen to me because he's a friend. And it escalated from there. We shot some video. We talked about what people in Portsmouth are doing to renovate the town and revitalize the downtown area. And the show is in serious contention, so we'll see. I also have because I never work in reality and I only really work in scripted, I have a pitch in development that we're going out with before Thanksgiving. That's with Rideback Productions. Rideback is Dan Lin, who they're doing the reboot of Walker, Texas Ranger. They did Lethal Weapon on television. He produced the Lego movie, so he's a bigwig on the feature side. He's Taiwanese, but a wannabe cowboy in the best way. So when you walk into his office, it's a full-on saloon with a bar and the mirror behind it, and the bar stools are saddles kind of thing. Like, it is crazy wonderful. So a friend and I pitched him a Western, and we're going to go out with that soon. And then I also, on the side, optioned a series of books with 2 producer friends of mine. And over COVID, I wrote an original screenplay and something, Scott, I don't know if you've talked about what a pitch deck is.
I've not gotten into the class yet. We've not talked about pitches.
Okay, because that is the latest, greatest thing. So I had to lay out basically 5 seasons of what the show will be in story arcs and character arcs and episodic. And then I also had to get a friend of mine to do the graphics, because that is now, and I blame the Duffer brothers who did Stranger Things, because they put together some amazing book of what they wanted the show to look like. So now when you pitch, particularly to streamers, even if you have a script, you also have to put together, it's just a lot of free work. It used to be called a Bible. They used to pay you up to do it. And I think the price was 50 grand the last I knew. Now writers are obligated to do it for free if you're even going out with a script. So that script went out right after Labor Day, and we're out to a very short list of producers who do, because it's a big genre show, we're out to a very short list of producers who do big, expensive genre things.
What genre are you talking about?
Fantasy. That's
Fantasy, okay.
It's like, I don't know if you watched, Game of Thrones. So it's sort of Penny Dreadful.
Heard of it. Yes.
Yeah. Penny Dreadful meets Game of Thrones. So
Gotcha.
completely different from Criminal Minds or SEAL Team.
Right.
But something that I love and that I find particularly in the world we're in now, with a lot of the issues that are facing us, I just saw the big Indigenous people disclaimer that came up, which was great. A lot of the racism and the racial issues and the sort of gender issues. It's a great way to explore those things. So that's what it's about.
Cool. All right, Dana, what do you got going? Anything?
SEAL Team.
Yes.
Yeah, that's all I'm working on right now is SEAL Team. We shut down production in mid-March, but the writer's room kept going to get a jump on this season. And we are finishing up the last 2 episodes that Holly mentioned from last season, because we were shooting them simultaneously. So today is the last day of production on those. And then Monday we will start production on the first new episode, which will be the 3rd episode. See how quickly I can confuse your students. And we have written 11 scripts, and we've broken 2 more episodes after that. So those are in some stage of being written. And now we're pushing forward to figure out how we're going to end the season. But CBS has not told us how many episodes we're actually making this year. So 13 episodes in, we don't know how much runway we have left to land the plane. So we're talking slowly in the writer's room these days. And our writer's room is virtual. It's a Zoom room. That's why I'm able to do my job from Ohio these days.
Gotcha.
So, and I have an episode in prep right now, which we'll start shooting 2.5 weeks. I don't even know when it shoots. It's going to start shooting sometime in October.
Yeah. Okay. Well, cool. All right. Well, so my icebreaker, well, kind of broke the ice, but real quick, what are you guys watching? And, talk a little bit about what you think about the screenwriting, and so, how you think the show's put together. Dana, you go first.
I was going to say I should go first, because my answer, unfortunately, is because I have time shifted my life and I'm working on LA time in Ohio. My workday ends so late that I have time to watch playoff baseball and then fall asleep.
We're doing well, Dodgers.
I know, we had a nice sweep. Although, let's just enjoy the sweep. Okay, I would say the shows that I have watched sort of most recently, I binged both seasons of Rami in the last couple of months, and I started Away on Netflix. I think I'm 3 episodes into Away. I'm trying to think of what the rest of my TV consumption has been.
That's okay.
That's kind of it right now. There was the second part of the question?
Well, is there anything you've noticed about the screenwriting in those shows that you go, oh, I like the way they do X, Y, or Z in that, or?
I will say it's interesting that those are the 2 shows that I have been watching. I don't know if people watch Rami. I highly encourage people to watch Rami. It's so well done. It's a half hour. It's a Hulu half hour. So sometimes, it's not a laugh a minute. It's not even sometimes. It's not a laugh a minute half hour. Rami is the main character, but they do entire episodes where Rami might not be in the episode or is only in one scene in the episode. So it really feels like, because it's a streaming show, they just sort of get to explore the storytelling in a way that we don't do on broadcast network television. And the same thing with Away. But both of those shows are so deeply character driven that I recommend them. If you want to learn how to write characters, watch shows about great characters.
I like Rami, but I told my students, I go, you can't write that show. You have to write it's about him and his life. If you're going to do that show, you have to write it about you.
Yes.
And hopefully you're interesting enough. So Holly, what are you watching?
I am watching Ted Lasso. I just actually finished Ted Lasso, which is amazing. It's a half-hour show. Jason Sudeikis, I guess, created this character of Ted Lasso, which is sort of an Oklahoma college football coach, for some spots he did on ESPN. And this is another thing, Scott, I don't know if you've talked about with your students, but right now, the bane of every writer's existence is the fact that everybody that's buying something wants it to be based on an IP. So it means an intellectual property. They want you to have found books or have some sort of news clipping or something that something's based on, which is a bit of a weird thing because we all want to sell our own original ideas, but they also will often haul out of the closet something that was made in Scandinavia and let's remake it here. It's just a trend, and everything in this business sort of ebbs and flows, but it's a big trend right now. So even on the front of this, you will see in the credits, it will say that it's based on a previous format. And it's simply that Jason Sudeikis created this character for ESPN for these little spots. But that was his sort of existing format that branched out into a half-hour comedy. Ted Lasso, the college coach, it's fish out of water. He goes to coach a soccer team in England. And it is brilliant comedy. It is heartfelt, and it is powerful, and there's some anger and there's some tears, and it's just, the casting is perfect to the extent that I looked up the casting director because I'd never seen any of these actors before. Jason Sudeikis is absolutely amazing in the role. It's a tough one to do on your own, again, but we're looking at sort of, the things we all aspire to. It would not be a show I would try to write myself.
Right. So Art, let's go back to your thing about basically spec is dead, or your original IP. You gotta, and I know I brought that up. Usually I start saving that kind of conversations till later in the class because I just want to learn how to write. But as they get serious about it, one of my later lectures is about pitching and development and contracts, and not deep contract, but just how not to get screwed in the industry. How much original programming is there? You guys are in TV that's not based upon existing IP. In your mind, is it 80%? Not
based on
original.
IP?
Yeah, 20% is not based on anything, and 80% is, some comic book, basically.
That sounds closer.
Yeah.
That's about right.
Yeah.
As a starting writer, you're always going to have to write something on your own, though. I'm sure you've talked about this. When I started, and I don't know if it was the same for Dana, but you used to have to write spec episodes of a television show to show that you could mimic a voice, because that's what television is everybody is signed on to mimic the voice of that show. Now they don't ever want to read that. They want to read your original pilot, which I've seen actually get showrunners in trouble, because that means that you've never found out whether someone can mimic a voice. So it's a bit of a catch-22 in television, but it simply means you have to have your own material.
Right.
So original ideas aren't dead. It's just that as you get into the world of pitching, there's some, the buyers now seem to want this security of this. Well, The Witcher is a great example, right? This was a video game that was a smash hit overseas, so let's make it a TV series.
Right.
I don't even understand the TV series. So, but it sold, and it got a renewal, and it got a spinoff. So
yeah, no, I watched the first season. It was enjoyable. It wasn't great. So, so all right, well, you guys are working in television, and I'll let you say, what are the advantages? You're not working in features, but what are the advantages of working in TV versus working in the land of features?
I'll start. Working in TV, you get to see your screenplay made and brought to life and distributed in a timely fashion. In features, your script might never get made. You could be paid to write a script and it might never get shot. That doesn't happen in TV. Unless you get paid to write a pilot, it doesn't get shot. But if you're working in series television, you have a tremendous sense of satisfaction at the end of the day.
There are screenwriters that have had a career that have never had a script produced, which is, if you're in this to actually want to have it make it to screen, that's lucrative, but kind of sad.
Oh yeah, no, it is. It's who was the guy? I can't think of his name. Guy wrote Quigley Down Under. What's his name? It'll come to me, but there was an article in the LA Times, basically the richest, unhappiest screenwriter in LA. He had sold like $10 million worth of specs, and none of them had been made. Yeah. Literally, he's got, right when I was moving out of LA, I read, he just sold a $700,000 spec to Paramount about some Arctic adventure. Never saw that movie, but he cashed a check for $700,000.
Yeah.
So it would be disheartening to say the least. Yes, you're rich. You're rich in bank account and hurting in soul. So, let's see, what else? What other questions? Do we have any? Claire?
There's one more thing, and you just heard Dana say she's prepping an episode right now, which is.
I was gonna say you get to be involved.
Yeah, in television, you're actually producing your own episodes, and as a screenwriter, it just goes away, and you might get invited to visit set, but you aren't producing your movie. So,
Oh, yeah, that's what I tell my students. Write for TV. If you want to be respected and have some power, write for TV, because you literally walk on the set and tell the director, who's just this kind of like tourist that comes in and says, stand here and do that, where you've been on the show for the entire season or multiple seasons. If you want to see your stuff get made and not have people just like, put their hand in your face, push you off set, write for television. You have a lot more. What is the percentage of, like, you're an executive producer, Holly, and so are you, Dana. So what are the percentage of writers who are just writers versus have a producing role in a show? And how do you get to that level?
I think the words have sort of sliding meanings, and it also depends on your showrunner. I was an assistant on a show who wrote an episode who was allowed to produce my episode, but I didn't have a producer title. The title itself is negotiated. Holly, is there something that I should add to that?
Men often get that title much sooner than women. We could say that. Men are often double, triple promoted in no time at all. Women slave in the trenches for a long time. We could say those things, hopefully. Although it's interesting, CBS came out recently with a statement about they're gonna, bring in more diversity. They did not mention more women. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're a minority in the rooms, in the writers' rooms. I've been on a staff of 13, the only woman multiple times. I think Dana's shared that kind of experience too. We were last season the only 2 females on SEAL team, and that was 11 writers, 13 writers.
Yeah, we brought in a third woman partway through the season.
Yeah.
This year there are 4 women in the room, and then there's a freelance episode that our showrunner's assistant is writing, and she's a woman, so she's getting a shot too. So in the 3 years that I've been on SEAL team, the numbers have shifted.
Yay.
Better.
Yeah. I mean, so all right, well, let's talk about when you guys started to where we are now. What is the percentage? I mean, it is getting better, right?
I have not seen it getting better. That particular SEAL team had a regime change, so things got better because it was a different, the showrunner changed out and things got better in so many ways. But
okay.
Since I started, I have not seen it improve. I have only once been in a writer's room that was equal, 50-50.
Yes.
Yeah. But with the hashtag Me Too and the events lately that have happened and sort of nicing up Hollywood, for a lack of a better word, hopefully things are starting to change.
I also think it's interesting because Holly's credits are more procedural, they're more sci-fi, they're more hard drama, and I've worked on some softer dramas. And so I think there has been more women in the room on some of the shows that I've worked on than in the rooms that Holly's been in. But every woman in those rooms had before coming into those rooms had the experience of being the only woman in a room at some point in her career.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right to point that out. That is a good point about, which is, it's funny because you're often judged as a woman that you can't write hard, or the term lately is muscular, which has no meaning whatsoever. What is muscular writing? But can you be a muscular writer is often seen as women can't do it as well as men.
Right.
Just
okay.
easy talk, but.
Right. I mean, you're on these shows that are, Navy SEALs. It's a bunch of guys going out, blowing things up and shooting things. So I'm surprised there are any women on the show. That's kind of just a win in itself. Yeah. But anyway, so let's. I got some questions here. Well, one of the questions, that came in early. So what at Ohio State? We've got a lot of Ohio State people. What happened to you at Ohio State, or how did it influence your career? How did you, were you able to use anything you learned at Ohio State to get you into the industry or catapult you forward in your careers?
Can I back you up for 1 second? Because I
Yes.
just want to say that SEAL Team, despite being about men, is to me a very emotional show. And I think Dana would agree. It's
Yeah.
about men that do that, but it's literally about the emotions that they're going through when they do it.
It is about the emotional toll of
Yeah.
being on the front lines in the war on terror.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I in my class, because I started the class before SEAL Team existed, I used the show The Unit at the Unit, because I also like David Mamet, even though he's kind of a jerk, as an example of that. And I said, what's the show about? It's about the emotional toll. These guys, I mean, the end of the pilot, the guy comes home after like killing 3 people, and the wife goes, carry out the garbage now.
Yeah.
And then something happens to distract him, etc. So yes, it is an emotional show. My wife watches it because she's got the hots for what's his face. Anyway, so all right, let's go back to the question, just so we can.
Ohio State.
Yes. Us just sitting here chatting. What at Ohio State did you learn that has helped you in your career? Holly, go.
The biggest thing I learned at Ohio State is that I could really write. It was one thing to be sort of a good writer in, Scott, you know, the size of our hometown and the size of our high school. That was one thing. It was huge to be seen as a good writer at Ohio State because the competition was so much more fierce. So I would say the first thing that Ohio State gave me was the confidence to know, okay, I can play with the big boys and I can do this in that kind of level. I took all of my production courses at Ohio State, and at the time there was nothing like there is now. So even though my major is listed as communications, I built my own major around every production class, every film class I could find. I had a theater minor kind of thing, like everything I could do to build what I needed to get where I wanted to be, and it worked. So Ohio State at that point, even though it wasn't offering things in as pointed a fashion, gave me so much of the knowledge that I based it on. And then when I went on to do a master's degree, that was strictly in screenwriting. But Ohio State taught me a lot in terms of the foundation and the fundamentals of making a film.
All right, Dana, you're a little later in the thing. So what did you learn at Ohio State that's helped you?
Well, it's interesting that Holly had those classes. When I applied to Ohio State as a senior in high school, and I believe when I went for orientation and signed up for my classes, there was still a department of photography and cinema. And then when I showed up fall of my freshman year, that department was gone, and those classes that I had signed up for, I had to find replacements for. I think at some point I did take a couple production classes in the communications department. So that was a good sort of foundational thing. Other sort of skills that I think really help, the size of Ohio State and learning to advocate for yourself and navigate has served me incredibly well in an industry that can be hard to penetrate. Ohio State, I was a humanities major. I have a degree in women's studies, and my friends were in the sciences or the business school. So being able to have conversations with people who don't think the same as I do and learning those communication skills, tremendously helpful, especially in a room like SEAL Team, where you have former special operators in the room who have very specific ideas about how things should be done. And then you have writers who want to come at everything from an emotional perspective. And so learning how to take the expertise that they have to offer kindly and productively and like mold it into a story, a narrative story for an audience to consume. I think just sort of those soft interpersonal skills I learned at Ohio State.
Cool. So let's see, I got a question. What got you interested in screenwriting? So were you at Ohio State, were you like, oh, I want to write screenplays, or did you want to write something else? So we'll go with Dana first and then reverse to Holly.
When I was in high school and before high school, I wrote all the time. And then when I got to Ohio State, I did not take a single writing class until after I graduated from Ohio State. I moved away for a little while, and then I moved back to Columbus and got a job at the university. And when you work at the university, you can take classes. So I took a creative writing class after I had graduated and sort of rediscovered my love of writing. I knew that I wanted to work in television. I didn't know in what capacity. I moved to Los Angeles to go to grad school and got an MFA in motion picture and television producing. I had a job my second year of grad school at a production company, went through a year of development there where we made 2 or 3 pilots and nothing got on the air. And it was incredibly dissatisfying. And at the end of my year there, my boss was leaving. So my position was being terminated. I needed to go find another job. I had the opportunity to go work at Comedy Central for the head of programming, or I had the opportunity to go work as an assistant to 2 writers on a new drama series. And I said, I want to go see what it's like to work in a writer's room because I always loved writing. Let's see if that's a muscle that I can work back into shape. So that was my path to writing. I didn't know that I was going to be a writer. I knew that I had written in the past and I wanted to work in television, and it just fit together very neatly.
Well, but I hate you then, because I wanted to make movies all the time, and your little light bulb went off. You said, boom, and I'm going to do it. So anyway, no, that's fine. And Holly, so were you into screenwriting? Was that your goal at Ohio State?
I keep referencing our past, Scott, but I will say we didn't really have a movie theater when we were growing up in Portsmouth. You know, nobody was showing Woody Allen movies. I didn't even know what it was. We had television. So I grew up on television. I grew up on reruns of MASH, that I think is one of the most brilliant TV shows ever. When I went to college, I was still watching television a lot. My roommates at Ohio State were in the honors accounting program, which was tremendously difficult. And I still like to watch TV, and I realized I could actually do that for a living. So my mind changed at Ohio State, frankly, was why would I do something that I didn't love when there was a possibility of working on something that I loved? At the time, I didn't know anybody that did it for a living, and no one that I was friends with at Ohio State or anywhere else actually knew anyone that did it for a living, but I was very determined. So, kind of crawled here. Did the undergrad, did the grad school. There was a possibility for an internship like Dana did when she was in graduate school. There was a possibility for an internship when I was in grad school. Although now I believe that you guys have set up a lot of things at Ohio State in terms of internships in the business. I know there's some late night stuff and other things, but there weren't at the time. So there was one position when I was at OU for an internship out here, and I camped out on my professor's doorstep because I wanted it so desperately. And I got it. And then they hired me when I was finished working for free, simply because, and I say this, and it's really important. Everybody I know from Ohio, everybody I know from the Midwest who went to places like Ohio State worked their tails off. And that is so different from so many people that come to Hollywood expecting success. And it literally matters more than anything else. It matters more than talent. It matters more than connections, is working hard, because Hollywood is the smartest, hardest working people that you will find anywhere. And you know that, Scott.
Yeah.
And it is long hours and it is hard work, but it is so wonderful. At any rate, I worked my tail off and they said, okay, you're hired as an assistant. And that, like Dana, you sort of start there, and work your way up.
Okay. So we have question here. What's the difference between a writer and a producer? I know, but good. So whoever wants to field that one, go ahead. Holly, go ahead.
Okay. Well, in television, as we said, the titles are sort of, they sort of slide around, but there's several kinds of producers in the writing world, and we'll stick with that. If you're a writer, you just write your screenplay and you turn it in and it goes away. If you're a writer and a producer, you get to control everything that goes into putting that on the screen in various, sometimes you control more, sometimes you control less, but it means from the beginning of figuring out what's the story going to be about, and then in the writer's room, guiding that story and that story structure and where it's going to go, figuring out once with any luck, you get to pick a director, or you've got a lineup of directors that are good. But then you get on set and you determine what's happening, and I should stop and go back to prep, which is what Dane is doing, which is what's the prop going to look like? What are the locations going to look like? You're on the scouts with the director, you're in the meetings talking about what's the concept, what's the big idea behind this episode? What do we want to talk about in this episode? How do we see the characters asking? And that sort of goes on throughout the entire prep. But then you also choose the locations, you figure out how you're going to make things look. There's a lot of things that involve money in terms of I set this, big scene at a skating rink during the day, and we can't afford that. So now it's going to be shot at night with 2 people standing by a wall. How do I make that work? What kind of rewrites do I have to do to make that happen? Then you're on set and you say to the director, I don't like that shot. You're going to need to do that again, or the actor needs to give that one more try, or we're never going to get it. We're going to have to move on, or the clock is ticking and we have to get to the next location, kind of thing. And then eventually you're in post-production, which is really fun and brings you back the closest, I think, to the original script. And you sit and watch take after take and help the editor and put the thing together. That's big in a nutshell.
Gotcha. Okay.
Sort of every producer does everything. That's the shorter answer.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that when you have your writing hat on, you are figuring out the story, and when you have your producer hat on, you are figuring out how to protect that story and tell that story within the constraints of the budget and the schedule.
That's what.
Well, I had time to think about it.
Well,
That's the advantage to not answering first. And then there are other producers, just because people see the credits. Sometimes an executive producer is somebody who controlled the IP for a project. Sometimes an executive producer is the star's manager. Sometimes, it depends. There's, if you're watching something and it says produced by and then a person's name, that person is what's called the line producer. And that is the person who is in charge of the physical production of the entire project. So then, yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. So, all right. So just this little side note, I've always wondered how many shows get shot and is there much reshooting in television, or you pretty much try to get it shot in that time?
Very little reshooting in television.
Very little.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I know, because it's a moving train. It has a destination. It's got to get there no matter what.
It is. Sometimes if you're lucky and the same director is going back to the same location on the same day and the same actors are available, you might get into it a little bit more, but.
Or if you have standing sets, that's true.
Standing sets.
Let's see. Somebody had a question. All right. How does someone write and sell a screenplay from Ohio? I mean, is that even humanly possible anymore?
I would say it's possible once you've become successful and somebody knows your name and you have agents and managers working for you. But I would think at the beginning, maybe COVID changes this, but at the beginning, you've always had to be here,
Right.
Because
yeah, I also think in terms of selling a spec screenplay, the odds for a professional writer are so slim. Everything either starts with IP or a pitch. So I don't even know if it's a question of can you do it from Ohio? It's can you do it from anywhere? There are some competitions. I don't know much about the competitions, but at least it's a way to get yourself noticed and closer to the path to eventually selling a screenplay.
Sure. Okay. Let's talk about moving to LA. I always give the advice, number one, use Ohio State as much as humanly possible, all the alumni contacts and any contact you know. And number two is have enough money in the bank to live for almost a year, unless you're willing to be a waiter or something like that, because you're not going to get work in that first year. What kind of advice would you give to anybody that is thinking about making the jump? Dana, you'll go first.
I would say that is good advice. I mean, the cost of living in Los Angeles will shock you. Moving out there from Ohio, it's crazy. Even here, when I drive around and I see gas prices, I giggle. Like I can't. And people are really like, "Oh, it's expensive right now." I'm like, "No, it's not. It's just not expensive right now." I think one thing that's different from when Holly and I were breaking in is when we were breaking in. I guess if you had like a camcorder and I don't know how you would have had editing equipment, you couldn't have sort of a resume or a reel when we were breaking in. I think now there is an opportunity for someone from Ohio, like you said, to take advantage of the resources at Ohio State and put together a web series or something like that, a bit of a calling card, so that when you get out to Los Angeles and you start making connections, you have something to show sooner rather than later. Mm-hmm. So I think being prepared as much as possible. If that means moving out to Los Angeles with 7 spec scripts that you've written, so that when you meet a manager or an agent who's willing to read you, you can just email them right away. Like, do as much work as you can before you get to LA.
Gotcha. All right, Holly, what's your
Yeah,
take?
that's a good point. My managers months ago said, have you seen the girl on TikTok that does the all the Big Ten? She did a spoof of every Big Ten football team. She's a rock star now. I mean, managers in Hollywood saw that and I'm sure clamored for her. Like, there is, as Dana said, so many opportunities right now that you could do from Ohio to get yourself noticed. That, I mean, if that is your skill set and something you could do, I would strongly advise you to do something like that, so that you have a calling card, that you are getting. We cast people based on their followers on Twitter. You know, I've had to cast the lesser actress or less talented actress because she had, you know, however many 100,000s worth of Twitter followers. So all of that social media stuff is important, and it is a great platform if you can use it. And
Yeah.
I would advise that. I came here with no money, no job, lots of debt, and no safety net. So as wonderful as it is to think I could have put a year's worth of money in the bank, I didn't have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
So I would say if you're going to do it, you have to do it. The one thing I will say that every time I hear somebody say they're only in LA, they're going to try it for a year, or they want to try being a screenwriter, I sort of move on to the next person, because it really takes commitment. This is a career that it ebbs and flows. There are highs, there are lows. There was one actress I knew who was, you know, sort of the voice on one of the Frozen things, and then didn't work for, 9 months. Like, you have to be committed and prepared to stick it out if you really want to. One of my bosses said it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So,
Right.
You sort of have to go with where your gut is at the time.
I have a
Sure.
friend who likes to say success in Hollywood is about who quits last.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Last man standing.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned agents and managers. How do you get, I mean, is it you get the agent first or the manager? And then how do you get an agent? Everybody's going to ask.
You get work first.
Okay. But how do you get work with
They
an
want
agent?
you after they know that you can make a living.
Yeah.
Holly and I think we had the same path, right? We were assistants
Yeah.
who got scripts, who got staffed. And then all of a sudden, once we got our first professional writing jobs, all of these people who make their money off of professional writers said, hey, can we represent you? They were not interested in helping us find that first paid writing job.
And believe me, we called them. We tried to get them to read our stuff, and our friends called them and tried to get the, working writers called them and said, you should read her, she's great. Until you can get paid for it. And even now, I mean, I always say you're always your own best agents. I have a pretty good track record with mine. They've gotten me about 50% of my jobs, and I've gotten the other 50%. But I know people whose agents have never gotten them a gig, but you just have to there you go. You have to have them, because you have to have that person who will do the negotiations and take those phone calls. And it's a tricky business in that way. We put a lot of people on a payroll simply because Hollywood works that way.
Yes.
But to answer the question, how do you find them? It is have your material ready. If you are not a working writer, which you won't be when you move out to Los Angeles, meet working writers, form good relationships with working writers, work up the nerve at some point after putting in the time and working very hard and earning the right to say, would you read this? Like, you don't ask someone to read your script the first time you meet them. Like, you need to have that relationship with someone for probably an entire season on a show.
You also have to have a house sat for me and walk my dog.
Yeah, exactly. Ask them to read your script. And if they respond to it, then see if they would be willing to submit it to either their agent or an agent that they think that you would be appropriate for. But be prepared for the agent to say, we love the script, let us know when she's working, and then we'll talk to her. Like, that is a part of the journey in Los Angeles.
I should say right here, because you're talking about having your material ready, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is thinking their material is ready before it is.
That's a very good
point. We had an assistant on a show I was on who said he wanted an episode, and episodes are hard fought over, man. Like, being the assistant that gets that episode is a huge deal. And somebody said, well, okay, you got to give us something we can read. And he went home and he wrote an episode over a weekend. which was insulting to every writer on that show, and also is impossible. It is impossible. You don't know enough of the characters and where like there is no chance at that. So make sure your material is meticulous, that you have prepared it, that you have had people read it, that you have taken the criticism on board, and that you have done your rewrites. So it is in the best shape possible, that it is at a professional level, because it has to be.
Yeah.
Oh, I would say this isn't really related to any of the questions that you've asked, Scott, but it's something that Holly said I think is important, just to understand what the job of a writer is, and also of a producer, but really of a writer. A large portion of your job is learning how to take notes.
Oh yeah.
Like, just because you write it doesn't mean it's written. And it is a big part of the job.
Yeah.
On a TV show, we serve at the pleasure of the president, and we serve at the pleasure of the showrunner, and you are there to write the showrunner's show, which is one of the reasons that I am currently trying to make my own show, is because I would like to be that person. But you have to learn to do what other people want you to do, and you have to take on board the things that they say are right or wrong. You also have to know when to fight for your vision and say, no, this is right. But that's a tricky learning curve. You know?
Yeah. So, all right. So it sounds like you're recommending going in at a low level, I don't mean a mean way, but assistant level. How do you get an assistant job then?
That's when you show up, and if you're lucky, you know someone. And if you don't know someone, there are assistant networks. I think if you're in LA for 4 hours, you'll meet someone who's an assistant in Hollywood who will say, oh, hey, I know a thing. There used to be a UTA job list.
There still is.
Oh, there you go. That's helpful.
There still is. Yeah.
I remember that. Yes.
Yeah, there still is, very much so. When we say that is one way to do it, it's a pretty tried and true way, but again, and I go back to, you can be a dentist. There's sort of a path to being a dentist. There are a million ways that people break in here. Everybody sort of finds their own way, but Dana and I happen to do it a way that is sort of tried and true, and that does work and does give you a strong base that you will need. Everybody that you sort of meet on your way up are the people you will work with. And that is one piece of advice I would say, is you don't want to compete with the other writers in your writer's room. You want them to be your comrades at arms, so that when the next job comes up or they're on another show and they need somebody else to help out on that show, that they call you. So you build a base if you come up from that way. But there are people who make a TikTok video and come in at the top. There are people who come in at the top because they were previously a lawyer. There are people who come in at the top because, of various and sundry reasons, they happen to be the guy that, took down Osama bin Laden. So you get to be an EP. Like, there are many different roads in Hollywood. But
I would also say, Holly and I keep talking about being an assistant on a show. Yeah. Those jobs are, there's more of them now because there are so many shows in production, but they are few. They're hard to get. They're sort of like the brass ring for assistant jobs, but there are other assistant jobs in the industry. Like, every agency and every management company has assistants, and you will learn so much if you do a year on a desk at an agency. Yeah. That you will meet contacts who can get you into a writer's room. And then when you're in that writer's room, you will have a much vaster knowledge of how the business works than somebody who hasn't done a year on an agency or a management desk. So those early years of low-level work are a form of poorly paid graduate education as well. Yeah.
So, all right. So, if you're working in an agency, a lot of time you're managing things. This is for the students. The agent is managing, but they can't read all the stuff that's being submitted to them. So that's going to land on your desk as an assistant. So you're going to learn, especially if they're working writers, you're going to learn hey, look, this is working, and non-working writers, you're going to read their stuff, and you'll probably understand why they're not working, or, and then ultimately you're going to read that stuff and then tell the agent, this person has the ability or this person doesn't.
And I would also say a lot of writers talk to their agents' assistants more often than they talk to their agents. And so if Holly sells a show, Holly's got managers right now. If Holly sells a show, I'm sure she's been talking to her manager's assistant on a fairly regular basis. And if that assistant has any interest in working in television, then that assistant has a relationship with someone who just sold a television show. So there might be an opportunity to transition there. Like there's it's all, yeah.
One of my manager's assistants actually is a big genre geek. So they have had her give me notes as well as my manager's giving me notes on my material. And I would hire her in a heartbeat, you know. But Scott, you get the same thing if you are an assistant on a studio desk too. If you are working for any of the studio executives, same thing. You get to read, you get to learn, you get to understand. From the agency point of view, you understand, I think, much more of how the town works. But if you work at a studio or a production company, you do understand how things are getting made and what writers are being chosen and why. So
Right.
there's so much to learn. I didn't write for the first 10 years I was here. And I am very grateful for not doing that. I worked for directors. I worked for independent producers. I was an assistant at an agency was my first gig. And, you know, I learned so much. And then I would go into a writer's room and I remember executive producers asking me, so what does the AD do again?
Yeah.
You know, which,
So that was leading to my next question. Do you think a basic understanding of production or even a medium level helps you in a writer's room?
Yes. There is a showrunner now. I won't mention any names, but a friend of mine is directing an episode. And the showrunner wrote the first episode. And Dana, there were 32 locations.
Oh my God. That is
The
crazy.
the episode that I am prepping right now has 3 locations. It is a bottle episode.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. 32 locations is unshootable, unproducible, unaffordable. Like, but that's a showrunner. Give that man a TV show.
Oh, yeah. Well, let's give us a definition of a showrunner for those who don't know what a showrunner is and what they do. Go ahead, Holly. You're trying to be one.
Ideally, the showrunner comes up with the concept for the idea. Says, this is the show I want to write. I love this Navy SEAL guy, and this is a TV show, and I'm going to do a show that is the fascinating, behind the scenes study of what these guys go through on the front lines, right? And then that person is hired by the studio. And by the way, at that point, that showrunner works for the studio because it's the studio and the network that are in charge now. It's the studio's money. So as much as you have your own vision, their vision may be different. But the showrunner is the person who is in charge of what the show's about. They're in charge to a level of all the hiring of every member of the writing staff, of every member of the crew. Not that they're going to get down into the nitty gritty of every member of the cast. They are the voice of the show.
Right. Okay.
They also make a great living.
Yes. And then you do 2 good shows, then you can just retire and you just live off the residuals. So,
and it lasts for 10 years. You're golden. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So just a side note. I mean, how much power do the stars have over the show? I mean, especially, probably at the beginning, not a lot, but when it becomes successful.
Dana.
I mean, I will say it depends on the show and it depends on the star. I have worked on, I've worked on 2 series where the big star with #1 on the call sheet also has some sort of producer credit. And so they are effectively also producers. They have, they weigh in on story, that they have a lot to say and you have to take them seriously because frankly, their face is on the poster. The show kind of lives and dies with them. So some stars have that kind of power. And I've also worked on shows where the cast was relative unknowns. So they were grateful to have the job and they did the words as written.
I had the unfortunate experience of somewhere in the middle of that on one particular show where the cast was not, they were mid-level name actors, but they were not producers on the show. And yet there was one scene that the director couldn't even finish shooting because the actors refused to do it. Fastest way to kill a show ever is to have actors who are not at that level revolt because it doesn't work. It can be a very tricky situation in certain cases, but most of the time when an actor has risen up to have their name, their face on the poster, they've been around enough and they know enough that they can work in conjunction with everybody. Yeah,
it's a collaborative medium. They have spent years collaborating. So usually it's never smooth, but it's usually painless.
If though you think that you're in a world where your words are going to be exactly on the screen and that the show is going to be exactly your vision, even if you're a showrunner, you should write a novel, because this is a collaborative medium, and that means that everybody has something to say, and that goes from wardrobe, which is incredibly important, all the way down to, craft service probably is going to give you their opinion, and it might be valid. Obviously, the people with the money, the studio is going to give you theirs. Every actor is going to give you theirs. It's very collaborative.
When it works perfectly, the expertise that people bring always elevates the material. Like, I've had times when someone in props will suggest something and I'll be like, oh, that makes the scene so much better, and now I can eliminate these 3 lines of dialogue because you have found a way to do it visually. Thank you.
One of the fascinating things for me has always been the art department, because they will decorate, like, say the young girl's bedroom on a TV show, they will decorate it with things that they believe that character that you've created, that they believe that character would like. I've seen them create an entire backstory on one show of the drawings and the photographs that were placed around one of the characters' rooms. Like, it is brilliant, and you need to be appreciative of everybody working on the show for those reasons. It's also why I like working in television, because sitting in a writer's room, as much as there's 13 of us trying to make a story, it makes it better. It's always better than I would have done by myself, every single time, and the long hours contribute to that too, unfortunately.
Yeah.
All
right, well, let me go to one basic question. Book. Is there a book or books that you would recommend for young writers to read? Or, I've got my things, but go ahead and you offer your book, some book that influenced you in your career about writing. Go ahead, Dan.
Dana?
Me? A book about writing. It's interesting. The one about screenwriting. The one that comes to mind, strangely, is Save the Cat, because what I really like about Save the Cat is that it does such a great breakdown of one particular script and walks you through how every single element of that script functions to tell the story that script is telling. I think it's for the math side of writing, I think, more than the creative side of writing. So I think it's very helpful. I honestly think you probably can learn as much or more from reading great screenplays as you can reading books about writing screenplays.
Yes. Holly, what's a book?
I totally agree. I would recommend, and it's not about formatting or anything, it's The Writer's Journey, Christopher Vogler, which is based on Joseph Campbell's, the Hero with 1,000 Faces, or whatever it's called, is a terrific look at the big picture of what makes a screenplay work. And I would also say read Stephen King's On Writing, because that's just a great read. Yeah.
That guy knows how to write.
Funny that, yeah.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, though, his stuff is so internal that I never find it making the best movies, and that's something that I had to learn, which is if everything is in the character's head, that's not a movie.
No. Yeah, I tell you, movies are about doing things, externalizing that. We can't see thoughts. Let's see, what's another one? We covered that. Somebody says, when are you too old to become a screenwriter? Is there, we talked about that a little bit, but is there a cutoff, or is there a point where you should probably say, don't try it?
I would say no. I would not say don't try it. It's interesting. Holly was talking about the CBS initiative that they just announced about increasing diversity, and the Writers Guild came out with a response that one category of a protected class that was not mentioned in CBS's initiative is older writers. So I don't know that there's ever a point when you're too old to be a screenwriter. I think it is an uphill battle to be taken seriously at a certain point, because it is a youth-dominated market. I do think that because there are so many distributors, so many content providers, there's more and more niche programming. So the odds might actually be better now that the story that you have to tell will have somebody who wants to get it to an audience that wants to hear it, which is not to say that an older writer is only writing for an older audience. But I'm hopeful that opportunities are going to improve for older writers.
I hope so too. Hollywood is traditionally super ageist, whether you're in front of the camera or behind the camera. And unfortunately, that's particularly true for women, which is horrible, but that's just a fact. I know a group of writers. I worked with one female writer that was involved in a lawsuit that they sued the studios and also their agencies for ageism. And an old writer here is considered anybody over 40. Like that is ageism kicks in at 40. So in theory, we'd like to say it's never too old to write. Is it an uphill battle at a certain point? Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
That's just the truth. But as Dana says, hopefully that'll be changing.
Gotcha. All right. We're getting near the 2:30 mark. Are we out at 2:30? Is that if I remember? What's the dumbest note you ever got on a script?
Oh, I love this one. I love this one. I was working on a science fiction show and the executive, we'd done a whole episode about time travel, and the head of the studio literally said, "That's not how time travel works," which is absolutely brilliant because we know it doesn't exist, right? So yeah, that's the dumbest note I've ever gotten.
The dumbest note I've ever gotten, I had written a scene for an episode of Nashville where a character was taking a sandwich to a homeless person who had sort of set up camp outside of where she was working. And the network executive asked if she was taking the sandwich on a paper plate.
Let's go. Was she?
Did you write in a paper plate? Did it matter?
I said, we can make it a paper plate if that's important to you.
Right. That's the thing. It's like, that's a battle that you don't fight because it's not going to change the world. We're running tight on time, but real quick, if you're writing on a TV show and you're like, you get episode 3, what does that mean? I mean, because you've been assigned, you in the writer's room, you create the giant arc for the show and what's going to happen. And then you get assigned, do you fight to the death to get that? Or how do you get that episode and what does it mean when you get an episode?
That depends on the show.
Depends on the show.
I've been on shows that say, look, we'll give you an episode. You come in and pitch us what episode 3 should be. And I don't care if you're the staff writer, I'll give you more episodes than I will the co-EP. That is a horrible situation to be in, because then the writing staff is at odds with each other. The better shows create a batting order, and you just sort of rotate through that.
Right. So, so you get that assignment. So there are beats and stuff already created. I mean, there's in the giant. So you have to interpret. All right. What's your autonomous part of that? How much do you have a 2-page outline and then you expand that?
The room breaks the episode. So the room will go through beat by beat. It depends on the show itself, how granular you get. I know friends who have worked in rooms where they tell you what the entrance, like the character's physical entrance to the scene is, verbatim what the jokes in the scene are, and literally what the exit of the scene is. I've been in rooms where you say what needs to happen in this scene is X, Y, and Z, and it needs to function in the greater scope of the script to cause this turn for the character. But that is the work of the room, to come up with the skeleton of the thing, and then the writer of the episode goes off and takes those beats and fleshes it out into an outline, and then turns the outline into a script.
Okay, that's just one. Clara, when are we out? When are we out of here?
3:30. So if you have a final question to wrap up.
Okay, well, I guess the final question would be, if you had to give one piece of advice to people in screenwriting, what would be the one thing? And I think we've already heard it, but let's reiterate the number one. So we'll go with Holly first.
Hard work. It is hard, and you have to work hard to do it. That would be it. You have to work hard to make your material the best. You have to work hard on, once you get the first gig, be it an assistant or whatever, you have to work hard, and you would be working hardest at the top. If you're the showrunner, you should be the hardest working person on that show. So.
And Dana?
Hard work, and I would also say humility. Even if you think you're the greatest writer in the world, don't tell people that, be someone that people want to work with.
Good. Yeah, no, it is. I mean, it's Anthony Bourdain said, don't work with a-holes, man. And nobody wants to work. You might be incredibly talented and you might work for a few years, but after a while, people will tire of you. and you will get less work. So I want to thank you for this. I mean, I told somebody this hour is going to fly by, and it felt like we were talking for 15 minutes. So, and I want to appreciate everybody who had all your insightful questions. I apologize for not getting to those. I had some questions of my own, and I tried to distill some of the questions you guys sent into mine. But thank you for taking the time to talk to our students and alumni and everybody, and thanks for everybody who came out.
Thank you.
It was a blast, actually.
So much fun.
Okay. All righty. Everybody be safe. Wear your mask. Don't lick any doorknobs. All right. Everybody.